In response to mass shootings in the last few years, more than 20 states have passed new laws restricting how people can buy and carry guns. With the current conversation in Sacramento, the focus on gun policy has never been more important for Californians. In the media, there's been an increase in coverage on mass shootings and police gun violence, but little coverage on gun policy reform. Today, we will be focusing on solutions. Hello everyone, I'm Andrea Medina, and we're joined today with 4 guests to discuss these very important issues. First, we have Kyle Murphy, a U.S. veteran. Next, we have Coleen Fatooh from City College Administration of Justice and also a former SF police officer. Hello, Coleen. Followed by Ruel Cordero, who is pro-Second Amendment and a private citizen. Hello, Ruel. And finally, Jakub Mosur, who is a gun control advocate. Hello.
Hello.
Well, I wanted to thank you guys for all being here. And I just wanted to remind you that we'll be reading approximately 4 questions, and we're going to give you guys about a minute each to respond. And after that, I'd like to open it up for all of you guys to discuss and give a response to everyone's answers on the panel. How do you view the media's coverage of guns and gun control policy in America? I can open it up with you, Kyle.
To be honest, in the last year or so, I don't really follow any media sources. I get most of my news from the world in front of me. So what I do know about the media's coverage of guns is very little, but what I hear is typically the violence that's taking place. I don't know that I've heard a whole lot of the reform conversation, actually. I've read one article recently about some things that California is working on with Second Amendments, but I have not really dove into reform. I don't know much of the conversation happening on reform, so it's something I'm interested in learning more about here today, honestly.
Okay, thank you for your response. I'd like to move on to Coleen, please.
Thank you. As far as the way the media is projecting gun violence and gun control in this country, I think it's all very politicized depending on which media station you're watching. I also don't think they're really addressing the salient issues around the gun violence in this country. Mm-hmm. I think we're looking, we look at the major mass shootings that we've had, and I personally, from researching those, I don't think gun control policy at this point is going to really stop that. I think there's so many guns out there right now that are getting into the wrong hands of people. Changing the age, having more restrictions. I mean, if you look at Chicago, Baltimore have the strictest gun laws in the country. And I'd say they have the majority of shootings. I'd say Chicago, I want to say in the last week or so, there have been 60 some odd shootings. The media doesn't even cover that. Strict gun laws. And yet it's not stopping gun violence. The majority of the gun violence in this country are usually perpetrated by people that don't have a really legal reason right to even carry those guns. So we're just putting limitations and restrictions on who can purchase guns.
Okay.
That really change things.
Thank you for your response. I'd like to move on to Ruel.
The mainstream media is always going to report with the bias. But let's look at that March for Lives march that happened all around the nation, March 24th. They gave so much airtime to these young teens and their views. Yet on March 17th, just a week prior, you had a shooting at a high school in Maryland that was stopped by a school resource officer. It was tragic that one girl did die, but he prevented everything else from happening. Who covered it? Did Fox, did CNN, MSNBC, or the other big guys cover it? Did you know about it? That's what I wanted to bring up.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes. So I think the media, having worked as a journalist in the past, tries to do a good job at covering some of the horrendous events that happen. And then a day, 2, 3 days pass by and everything's forgotten. We have a new topic that we're covering at that point, some natural disaster or something else, and we basically kind of drop the ball on continuing the conversation. And I think we do have a problem with guns in this country. It's a severe problem, and it's a cultural problem, and it's a problem from the federal government's level, because we have an amendment in our country that basically allows to have guns for every citizen, and I think that's problematic, and that is why people get guns in the first place, is because they can either steal them or buy them illegally from people, and there's way too many loopholes out there for people to gain these horrible tools of death. And we really need to reconsider what we should do going forward and how we should approach this from a government standpoint.
The New York Times in 2015 reported that criminals in California use 6,000 guns traced back to other states, such as Arizona and Nevada, 2 states with very lenient gun laws. What are ways we can prevent criminals from trafficking guns undetected? I can start with you at the end.
Okay. Well, that's going to what I was saying earlier. It's a problem where you can have cities like Baltimore or Chicago with strict gun laws, but that doesn't do anything, because we have an entire nation where you can get any kind of gun you want at anywhere. You can go drive to Indiana and purchase whatever you'd like and take it into Chicago. So the problem is it's on a national level. We need to be thinking, and not just a national level, it's a global level. It's a global issue that guns basically provide a solution to problems, a violent solution. We should be talking to each other and not using a tool that is intended for warfare. That's what guns basically have been designed for. That's what they evolved to be. Throughout the 600-700 years of warfare, we've been improving guns further and further to the point of where you look at World War I, you look at World War II, you look at our Civil War in this country where we had carnage beyond belief because these guns are so good, they're so accurate, they're so able to maim one another. Having more of them does not improve our situation. It causes problems. We need to look at solutions that Australia, United Kingdom, that Germany have taken on, Japan. You look at these nations, they do not have anywhere to the same level of gun violence that we do. We need to become a little bit more humble and see what are other nations doing in solving their problems with their guns and taking on a very coherent way of dealing with this issue.
Thank you for your input.
Sure.
I'd like to go down the line.
I'm going to refute that. There's no such thing as a lenient gun law. I cannot go to Nevada and buy a gun because I'm a resident of California. I do not need a permit to buy a gun in California. All I need is a driver's license, proof of residence, like a utility bill, and California has instituted this firearm safety certificate, which basically means I answer 25 common sense questions on safety of guns. But on top of that, I wanted to just bring up to you, in 2015, the ATF reported 40,000 cases of straw pretend buyers of guns. 48,000. Yet only 40 were prosecuted. Why was that? The criminal severity to be a straw buyer is either 10 years in jail or $250,000. But yet, how did these folks in Indiana get the guns to Chicago? They'll get their significant other, their girlfriend, their best friend, their cousin, their auntie to buy the guns for them, and then they'll say, oh, it got stolen. All they have to do is crack down on that and enforce the law that's already in the books, and then guess what? You're going to stave off the flow of illegal guns to these cities. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Coleen?
I agree with what he's saying there. I don't think there's going to stop them from coming in at this point. I know in San Francisco, lots of the guns that were involved in criminal activity tried historically to go back into the records to find out where they may have been purchased in Nevada and places like that. But again, the hands that they were in when the crime was committed were not the legal hands of the person that purchased the gun. They weren't somebody that had the legal right to own that gun, and oftentimes not even the legal right to possess that weapon, and yet they still do. Again, I think a lot of it is the enforcement of the prosecution. In San Francisco, how many guns do we confiscate? I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, over 500 guns were confiscated in arrest situations. And I want to say there might have been 1 or 2 convictions. Very, very minimal. I don't want to necessarily be quoted on that, but the numbers were significant. And I remember thinking, this is outrageous. Why are we not being more proactive in going after, once the officers make an arrest, if they make an arrest for somebody that has a firearm that doesn't belong to them, or stolen firearm used in a crime, why aren't they being prosecuted? What's happening?
Thank you, Coleen. And we're going to move on to Kyle.
Well, I think I'm going to cover just briefly a little bit of kind of what everybody has said so far and start with leniency in being able to buy guns. I'm a veteran and I'm unable to purchase a firearm. Don't know why, have been unable to find out why, have kind of been told that if I wanted to know more, that hiring an attorney and going down this lengthy and difficult process would essentially be the only way to do that. Something I'm not really interested in because at this point I don't really believe I need a gun. I used to carry around a pocket knife, and I've recently even stopped carrying that because I've just kind of come personally to this place where if I'm in this situation, I would like to not need to kill someone. Like, I don't want to kill another human being unless that is like an absolute necessity. And honestly, just carrying the pocket knife around it had led me to a place walking around in dark portions of San Francisco, like having this paranoia and thought of like, man, if somebody was to creep up on me, like, where would I put the knife? Like, how would I do these grotesque things? And just removing that knife from my pocket has led those thoughts away from my mind. Like, I don't have those same crazy thoughts in my head as I'm walking down an alley in the middle of nowhere. And I think ultimately where I'm trying to go with that is that we're not going to stop this undetected traffic. Like, it's already there. They're illegal. They can get them. What we need more of is conversation. We need more people to be empathetic to the issue.
Okay. And I just want to open it up if anyone had a response to some of the panelists. Yes, please.
I just want to quick to Ruel. He said that you can't buy a gun anywhere else, but if you go to a gun show, you don't necessarily. You can go bypass a lot of the regulations on purchasing guns, and also you can purchase guns online. And a lot of times you can go around the system and game the system, and then as Coleen mentioned, a lot of these guns can be stolen because there's so many of them. And the other problem here is, look at parents who have guns, whose kids access their guns. This is beyond belief. There's toddlers who are shooting their parents. It's crazy. I mean, the last statistics I have here, in 2013, we had 33,000 deaths from guns and 73,500 non-fatal injuries. I mean, this is a lot of people we're talking about, and it's, and 500 deaths due to accidental negligent discharge. 500 people. This is on an annual basis. There's no reason for us in this country, in this day and age, to have guns. And sure, you might have a disagreement. Oh, what about a tyrannical government? Well, how do you decide what's a tyrannical government? Are we going to go with someone like McVeigh, or are we going to go with someone like who pulled off that stunt back in Oklahoma City? Or are we going to have like Czolgosz, Leon Czolgosz, who assassinated McKinley? Who decides that? Is it on an individual basis, or is it a communal basis?
Okay. Yes.
I just like to just go on the two points you made, Jakub. On the gun show and on the online, or I go to a brick and mortar, I cannot buy a gun unless, number one, I pass a background check, I produce the proper credentials, my ID, what have you. The loophole that people talk about in gun shows is this specifically. You got two guys out in the parking lot, one guy opens up their trunk, shows them a cache of guns, and then they do an illegal private transfer. Who's doing those transfers? Probably organized crime. But you walk into a legitimate gun show, every vendor in there has to be vetted out, and everyone has to fill out a very extensive federal form if you want to own a firearm. That goes with a gun show, that goes to an online purchase, and that goes to a brick and mortar.
As far as the purchasing, the age, and all that is not going to stop the kind of items we have in the past. The guns are out there, they're in the wrong hands, and they get in the wrong hands because of negligence, theft, criminality. If you drive your car now, you're afraid, you don't want to honk your horn. You don't want to give somebody a dirty look because the next thing you think they're going to pull out a gun and shoot you. And that's the kind of stuff that's happening. So when you're talking about walking down the street with a knife in your pocket, not even having a knife in your pocket, not having a gun on you, you think, don't say anything to anybody because you'll never know what's going to happen. I saw a lot of those cases, road rage. People all of a sudden have a gun, the next thing, instead of just getting out and saying something to somebody, the next thing they're shooting somebody. But again, I think when the media and everybody talks about, the politicians talk about this gun reform as far as buying legal guns, I don't think buying legal guns is the issue right now. There's so many guns out there and they're being purchased, like you said, for a black market by criminals. What do we really do about that? That's the issue that we need to deal with. And the criminals and the mentally ill. And what are we doing about that? Because that's really a big problem. And I don't know at this point, how do we get rid of all the guns in this country? There's so many. It's like, where do you stop? Because they continue to get into the wall.
Kyle, did you want to finish it up?
Yeah, I think it just comes back to kind of how I ended what I said last time. And it's empathy. It's understanding that, like, yes, there are crazy things happening in the world. There are always crazy things happening in the world. There's 7 billion plus people. When you put that number in comparison to the tens of thousands, it's like tens of thousands is still a lot. It's a number I'd like to see get even smaller. But I think time and compassion and understanding and these kinds of things where you're putting conversation about these tough issues in front of more people, that's how we get to zero.
So some argue that concealed carry permits will decrease violence due to protection and self-defense. Yet the National Bureau of Economic Research in 2018 reported that violence is still 13 to 15% higher in right-to-carry states than others. What are your thoughts? I can start with Coleen this time.
Well, I think they looked at Texas. I think there was a study out of Stanford that showed almost contradictory stuff prior, like in 2004, and then again, 15 years later, or 14 years later, saying that the fact that you have a gun in a dispute that would, like a normal, let's say a domestic violence argument, that there's more shooting now because of the accessibility. You have your gun, so you're going to go to your gun before settling something outside of that. But they were also talking about that there's other conditions that also change, what those crime stats are. Are there more police officers? Was there more, they say in Texas, was there more incarceration at that time? So some things went down as the others went up. So it just depends on how we're looking at the data. I don't think that, I think there would be definitely some merit to the fact that if more people are walking around with guns, there's more road rage, there's more domestic violence. Those type of crimes, yes. Overall, no, I think most of the time, people that have a right to carry the guns are not the ones out there actually doing the shootings.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to Ruel, please.
You're not gonna like this. The particular study you cited, it's unpublished. The report doesn't even appear in any peer-reviewed journal. I had to look hard to dig it up. And it's basically a 100-page, all stats and stuff, and I'm not a statistician. Interestingly enough, there's a similar study that refuted this study that concluded that people who have a concealed weapons permit are the most law-abiding people walking around. Case in point, I tried to apply for a permit due to my business. I passed a stringent background check, and after 9 months of waiting, I got declined because I didn't meet their good cause, okay? So the bad guy gets to walk around with his gun hidden. I gotta leave mine at home. That doesn't make sense to me. But more on this one. Regarding Texas, I did a little bit of research here. From 2004 until today, California had 11 mass shootings. Okay. In Texas, there were only 4. Why is that? And we have the most strictest gun rules in the nation, yet compared to the most supposedly lenient, they only had 4.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll let you finish up your points. I want to give everyone a chance to speak.
Hi, I'm not a fan, obviously, of guns themselves, let alone being carried privately or hidden in someone's clothing. Humans are dynamic. I mean, what I want to get down to is the psychology of it. Humans may be good at one point and bad at another. So you might have a bad day. You've been a great law-abiding citizen up to the point when you decide to use your gun to either settle a dispute or because you're feeling depressed or something bad happened to you, you got fired from your job. It is just very detrimental to have people walking around with tools of death at the ready to be able to shoot somebody. Who knows, someone might be coming up to you to ask for directions. You have no idea. If you're always at the ready, it creates a psychological kind of you're on the edge constantly. You have this tool with you. You cannot be compassionate toward other people. You cannot open up. You cannot connect with others if you have this ability to take their life at any moment just because you might feel uncomfortable. Look, I have never carried a weapon on me, and I've traveled all over East Africa. I've been to the Middle East. I've been all over Eastern and Western Europe. I've been to Japan, and I've been to Haiti, and I've never felt that I needed to take someone else's life, no matter how dangerous the situation might have been to me. I try to find other ways of figuring out a way to out of it, either get myself out or discussing with someone and connecting them on a human level.
Thank you for that reply. Sure. I would like to wrap it up with Kyle.
Yeah, so, 11 mass shootings in California, only 4 in Texas, but only 4 is 4 too many. And I think if you want to see a place where there are 0 mass shootings, you need to be at a place where there are 0 chances that somebody is going to use weapons that can be used for mass shootings anywhere. Like, if you look at, the name does not come to me at the moment, but the man who was passionately trying to end the nuclear armament in the 70s met a yogi whose statement was that human philosophy still led us to a place where the creation of the nuclear bomb existed. This need for that level of violence, whether you get rid of the nuclear bomb or not, is still present in the conscious of the human being. That's what needs to change. You can get rid of the bombs, you can get rid of the guns, but if we still have people walking around this earth who have a level of hatred that needs to be ended with violence through the death of another human being, the problem still remains.
I would like to give you guys the opportunity to respond to anything heard so far.
I view, if I were to have the opportunity to carry a gun, I view that like a tool. Just like I have a spare tire in my car, I carry fire insurance, I got a fire extinguisher in my kitchen. I'd like to cite to you a DOJ study concluded that 57% of criminals would be more afraid of me packing something than they would be of a police. So most likely they're not going to accost me. If, let's say, there was a diner or subway and there's a high likelihood that 3 out of the 10 patrons in there might be armed, that criminal is probably going to say, ooh, I'm going to go ahead and go for an easy place. Somewhere there's going to be a gun-free zone. I'll target that.
I have a response to that. Can I?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
So, according to you then, there's no criminals ever shooting police officers? Seriously. Someone else having a gun has never stopped someone else using a gun. Look. So what? Look at warfare. People have guns on both sides. They kill each other.
I'm going on facts. That's all.
Facts. So am I. Yeah. We're both going on facts, but we're both interpreting these facts differently.
I think it would be the same sort of analogy as if you look at victimology and say your robberies. Mm-hmm. Most of the perpetrators are going to go after a victim. I think it's going to be basically the easy target. You're a predator, you're prey. You're going to go after the easiest prey, easiest one to catch. Exactly. If you're going to go and get involved in criminal activity, are you going to go after the person that you feel a threat? No, you're going to go where you're going to reach your objective. Whether it's to steal, whether it's to kill, whatever it's going to be. You're going to do it that way. I would think that would just kind of be human nature. I also agree with what Kyle had to say.
Yeah.
There's a bigger issue here. Guns, they're a symptom of a very sort of sick society, a society that needs to heal. There's a lot of problems in this culture, in our culture, that need to heal. And I think the mass amount of shootings, the number of guns on the street that are in the wrong hands of people that are doing the wrong things, we need to really look at that deeper. I don't think that's the issue that's necessarily being addressed all the time.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, your idea of if you could have the concealed carry, it would make you a less likely target. You don't carry a gun now with no concealed carry. How many times have you already been a target? How many times without the gun have you been shot at? How many times have you been stabbed? How many times has the bank or the subway you've been in been a problem where that gun would have helped you? 0?
For me, yeah.
Right, and that's the majority of the percentage of people. Of 7 billion of us, most people have not dealt with that kind of thing.
It's the criminal who choose the time and place, though.
Right, the criminal exists, the evil exists, yin and yang balance. That's the way the world will always work. There will always be issues to work on. But adding to what we are claiming is the issue doesn't solve the issue. If the issue is being shot by people with guns, how does being another person with a gun move us in the direction where people aren't getting shot with guns.
Okay, very valid points all throughout the table. I just wanted to wrap it up with our final question. Recently, media coverage on police brutality has increased. Treatment of suspects have come into question, and a divide has been created on how suspects of color compare to that of Caucasian suspects. What is your opinion on this portrayal, and do you think reform gun policy can prevent this divide? I'll start with you, Ruel.
I like numbers and facts. Start with that then. 13% of America are black. You take out the old and the young, you're left about maybe 4 to 5%. They commit 52% of the homicides. That's statistics from the DOJ. A policeman in Burlingame is going to administer the same type of law to a black or a white person if they commit the same crime. But a policeman in Oakland or Richmond, they got to be more vigilant because the odds favor that a person of color will most likely be the one perpetrating that crime with a deadly weapon.
Okay. Jakub?
So I think this is a good time to kind of discuss the history of guns in the United States and the history of why we have a Second Amendment, and partly I think was as a defense against tyrannical governments, but also as a way to have militias in our nation to defend us also from possible slave revolts, and also to have a defense structure against Native Americans. So when we're looking at the justice system, the way it's done, it's just a long litany of our fairly bloody history in this nation, and granted, all over the world, but we're not some great place where nobody's ever been hurt. It's been a pretty rough ride, including our Civil War, and we have to consider the economic situation. We have to consider the opportunities that people of color have to deal with on a daily basis, and we have to consider with the institutions that we've created and how those institutions treat people, and including the police, including our justice system, and having a control of our guns, I think, will help a lot in this situation and will diffuse the racial issues that we're dealing with right now at hand.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to move on to Kyle, please.
Man, I'm just going to keep my answer simple. No, I don't think gun control is the solution for racial divides and racial tensions. Something I experienced a few times when I first moved to this city in particular was a conversation ending in this idea of, you can't understand, you're a white male. And I understand I don't understand what it's like to be a black male or an Asian woman, but I also don't understand what it's like to be another white male. Like, I don't understand what it's like to be him because he has lived his unique life. And again, back to this idea of, like, help me understand. Be empathetic. Like, what I do understand is shit. I've waded through it. I understand a tough life. We all have our differences. We all have these struggles we're going through. Being open and empathetic to other people's struggles will help bridge the gap. It's just time. Like, the racial divide will heal with time.
Thank you, Kyle. And Coleen, please.
Well, my feelings on it, I agree with what everybody is saying. Again, the gun piece is a symptom of lots of different issues. Mine was untouched the media. And when we look at the different things that have happened, I think they've made a bigger divide between white and black, between the police and the community. We need to sit down and come up with solutions. We don't need to build a wall bigger and higher. Every time there's a police involved in a shooting, again, I was a police officer, so I put my sensitivities there. But I look at it openly. There's been some shootings that are wrong. We've seen it across the country, first to admit it. The majority of these shootings come in within policy, because that's what the policy is. And yet the media will continue to play it and play it and play it. And I guess that's, they get their likes or whatever when they do that. But again, it just seems to it's building hate, and it's building divisiveness between different communities. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that's helping in any way. And I just think it's dead wrong.
Thank you for that, Coleen. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give some closing statements before we wrap it up. I can start with you again, Ruel.
I'd like to close with this. If you try to stymie or do any kind of gun control here in the U.S., because it's been so ingrained in our culture for the last couple hundred years, it'll always fail. Simply because the notion of having, being able to protect yourself is enshrined in our Declaration of Independence. The life, liberty, and protection and pursuit of happiness. And if one of that is a tool that allows me to protect myself, then so be it.
Thank you so much. Coleen, I believe you have something to say.
Okay, I somewhat agree with you. But let's look at our right to privacy and how important our right to privacy is in this country. Always. Look how much of our right to privacy we've given up with CCTV, with phone carriers, GPS, people knowing where we're going. And I think it's gotten to the point now, and there's certain cases that'll go, say, to the Supreme Court, and they're looking at communications acts and different things, but most of America has been okay with giving up some of our own personal liberties for the common good. Everybody said, oh, you'll put up cameras, and it's going to be Big Brother, and everybody's going to be upset. When they found out that's solving crime, and there's crime oftentimes is being reduced because of them, you don't hear a lot of people complaining. So at some point, when people start saying, you know what, I'm willing to give up some of my freedom, some of my constitutional rights for the betterment of this country, I think it can be done. But again, it's going to have to come around honest conversation.
Thank you for that, Kyle.
Yeah, I think when we talk about rights, the written rights, the stuff on a piece of paper that some human being wrote 250 years ago or 400 years ago, or in a religious text thousands of years ago, dozens of languages ago, like all of those different types of things ultimately come back to this place of like the true rights, the right to be loved, the right to be happy, like that pursuit of happiness, freedom. Everybody has those inherent rights as soon as you are born. And I think the idea that it will never change, the idea of never or forever, in either of those cases, I don't think that's true. I think the only constant in the entire universe is change. And some of those changes are uncomfortable. We don't understand what it will look like after those changes, but fearing the future is kind of silly. Like, you're never going to be there. Here is where we are. There, as soon as you're there, it's here. So like, just let's work on fixing now, and that'll ultimately make a better future.
Thank you for that, Kyle. Jakub.
I just have to say what Coleen just said is beautiful. I mean, this is exactly where we want to go. Think outside the box and think really to the roots of where we're from. And I have 2 daughters, and really my intention is to have a safer world for them and for their generation and the generation that comes after them. And we really have to reconsider, like, do we really need certain rights in a part of our history at this juncture? There's certain things that we can tweak in some ways and recognize maybe we can change things a little bit. It is an amendment. We have a 5th article that can change our Constitution. Our founding fathers had the forethought that, hey, we have this living document that we can adjust and change and do things in a way that make things a better place, a better world, in a sense. Because we're not just one nation, we're a global community, and we need to be thinking on a grand scale, because we're all humans, we're all cousins. Every single one of us are related to each other, and we gotta remember, we are all brothers and sisters here. And that's what it really comes down to, is treating each other with respect and looking at each other and thinking, okay, what's the most peaceful way of resolving our issues between the 2 of us? That's it. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to thank each of you for your eloquent response and being very respectful and starting this discussion, very much needed discussion on gun policy and speaking on topics of gun violence. Well, that's all the time we have today for the panel. Thank you to our guests again for being here and sharing their individual perspective on this very serious issue. Stay tuned for more IDTV.